Welcome back, everybody. If I could just read out the names of the 5 people who've agreed to feedback from the workshops, just so that they're ready. We're going to do it in the order of the workshop. So it'll be Darren Baker first, maximum 5 minutes. Huguette Bayens from workshop 2 on research. Nick going to do workshop 3, and workshop 4 is Claire Bien, and workshop 5, Kermit Cole. So if I can get this right, I'm going to ask Darren to, there he is, to unmute himself. And I think I'm going to stay here too, so I just can feel I know what's going on. So Darren, up to you, and I'll give you I'll let you know when the time's nearly up.
Yeah, that would be nice if you stayed on. I was hoping that we could feedback in a more kind of dialogical way rather than me just having a monologue. So if I dry up, maybe you could ask a question or two. But yeah, I was chairing the workshop looking at open dialogue developments in hospital settings. And we had 3 presentations, 2 from Germany, from different contexts in Germany, and 1 from Norway. And yeah, it was very interesting to me, as my experience has been in the community in the UK, so I had no experience of working using OD in hospital settings. And I was, I suppose, immediately struck by how challenging those environments are to introduce something like open dialogue. The participants sort of talked about the existing culture within those inpatient settings, being very hierarchical, being one where sort of coercive treatment was not uncommon, being one where there was a lack of transparency often. And so it was impressive to see how people had taken up the challenge of introducing open dialogue ideas in these very unfriendly environments, unfriendly in a sense. And I think one of the things that struck me was a kind of attitude of we just did it. You know, the Norway team talked about how they didn't kind of wait around for permission or for approval from psychiatry and psychology. It was mainly nurses that introduced it there, and by doing it and then sort of showing how it could work and the positive impact that it was having on service users and relatives and carers, that then enabled them to go further. But there was an interesting sort of difference in one of the presentations. So in 2 of the presentations, it felt like it was very much a kind of bottom-up process, where there were lots of people on the ground who were really kind of passionate about the approach and really sort of tried to get things going, and over time sort of convinced people higher up to at least give it a go, if you like. But in one situation, Werner's situation in Germany, it was more of a kind of top-down approach initially, where the CEO of that hospital approached him and asked him what kind of ideas they could use to develop the service there. But Werner's approach was very much to involve all staff at an early stage of that process to try and get them brought into the process. And my sense of what helped there was, he talked about there being a pre-existing culture which was quite sort of democratic, and that seemed to kind of help. But yeah, there were many challenges along the way, as you can imagine, and it was interesting to me that many of those challenges were very familiar to me, even though I'm working in a very different context. The challenges were very familiar. You know, how do you involve people who perhaps aren't sold on this approach? How do you avoid a kind of division building up in a team between those people who are open dialogue trained and those people who are not.
Darren, what about the discussion in your group following the? Just give you got a minute or two on that before you.
Yeah, so I sort of asked in the discussion. I sort of asked the question: what did people think they'd learned? If they did it again, what would they do differently? And that came up with some interesting points. I think people talked about being perhaps more modest and more humble. People talked about the ability to learning the importance of compromise, and perhaps maybe taking more time and doing things in a kind of more step-by-step way, rather than sort of aiming for the ideal straight away. People talked about the importance of making allies and linking in with other people interested in developing the approach. In Norway, they did that through a kind of yearly conference of people interested in open dialogue. Yeah, so on the one hand, there was this idea of just do it, but then there was also this idea, this acceptance that it's a marathon, not a sprint, and things need to be done. Kind of echoing Nick's point early on about, we need to take our time with this, and we need to do it in a kind of slow, thoughtful, reflective way.
Any other headlines before I say time's up?
There's probably lots, but that feels like enough to me.
Be time for more in the open meeting. Thank you very much, Darren.
Thanks.
Hugwet, thank you. Hugwet, could you bring yourself into focus? Hugwet. There we are. And first of all, thank you very much, because I asked you if you would feedback halfway through the discussion almost. So I was very grateful to you. Over to you, Hugwet. Yes, you were in workshop 2, the research workshop on the research from Western Finland, yes. Western Lapland.
Yes, I have not a lot. I was a little bit overwhelmed by your question, but I have noticed that the research was very impressed me a lot, and at the same time approves a process that is very natural. I believe it is an innate need and quality of humans to encounter the other by dialogue, and according an innate possibility to attain an inner dialogue. And psychosis is in a certain way is an eruption of not related dialogues who seeks relationship to be embedded. I am so very excited about the results of the research about reducing the average of time of hospitalization. And yes, I am very delighted about the statement of Jaco based on lived experience that psychosis is a healthy response to an unhealthy situation or environment. This is very yes. This is what I really experienced too in many situations. When we can listen to the family and to the stories of people, then we can see that what unhealthy become a story in words, and what was hidden become a part of the story. Not always named by words, sometimes by gestures, or sometimes by changing in the atmosphere. So yes, that is what I have noticed during the conversation. And I saw also that this was very inspiring for all the participants. They are looking from diverse perspectives on what Jaco was said and what you are bringing in about the research. and it's for, gift and inspiration for dialogue with each other from diverse, many perspectives. And this is also the great gift, I mean, from open dialogue, that we can share from different perspectives and feeling what it means to live an encounter in and to find common ways and common tools to work with people. This is what I can say.
And Huguette, just if I could add something, because what was centerpiece, I think, in much of the discussion we had after Jaco and I presented the results was the amount of nastiness, in a way, with which the results are met, and the attacks on Jaco himself, and this resistance, in a way, to accepting or denying the reality of the results, in a way, finding all kinds of ways to undermine them. This was a big part of our discussion.
Yes.
Was
yes.
In a way, to paraphrase, there's research that we like the findings, and
yes.
there's research when we don't like the findings and
yes.
like to disregard them, in a way. So this was a major part of our discussion on what to do about it. And I think if I could add those comments.
This all make it very interesting. This is a dynamic in the conversation, and that this is the beginning of change.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And how much this is something to be accepted, in a way, as part of the paradigm change, and how much the affects involved in change for people, for psychiatrists especially, and one colleague said that almost that when they hear these results, there's a danger of driving psychiatrists mad, in a way, with the with it upsetting their world attitude towards psychosis. Yeah, thank you very much, Huguette. And we move on to the third workshop, which is on the training, the 3-year training. And Nick himself is going to respond to to present the feedback to the larger group. Nick.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So I'm not going to be able to do justice to all that we covered in an hour and 15 minutes, but I'll do my best. In our workshop on training, I started out by just presenting something about what's important for me about training processes, and I suppose what I've learned along the way in some 6 years of being involved in trainings. And I started off by sort of questioning what is training, and the etymology of the word suggests something more technological, that we try and manipulate people to a desired form. And my experience of trainings has been very different to that it's much more of an embodied rather than a technological process. So we started to think a little bit about that. And in that, I wondered about the difference between the concept of technique and the concept of skill, and how might we understand that difference. But clearly, education is very important within open dialogue training, and one of our group, Raffaello, wondered whether we should call it open dialogue education rather than open dialogue training, for the reasons I've just mentioned, and maybe others. When I first went to Lapland, and I was questioning about the success that they were having there. What I'd invariably hear from many of the practitioners and senior people who've been there 30 odd years was our training programs are very important and core to what we do, and their training is core training is a 3-year training, sometimes run as a 4-year training. So I came back to the UK with this idea very much in mind. So we started with the 3-year training, and went on to also add in a foundation training, because realizing that only a small proportion of people are going to be able to access a 3-year training, but we want to change the system or develop the system, we need to have these foundation trainings as well. So I talked a little bit about we got into sort of the question of how do you teach not knowing? Not knowing being a core aspect of our basic position as practitioners. and I'll come back to that in a moment. I talked about the commonalities in training programs. They tend to be for 20 to 30 people. People are sat in circles, a mix of different professionals, including peer workers. A lot of value with including people with different backgrounds in the trainings. It enriches the dialogue. And there's more than one trainer on each training day. Looked at a little bit of the structure between the different structures between the 3-year and the 1-year training programs. And then there was comments from the trainers who've been involved in that. And in terms of the structure, in terms of the 3-year training, there's 3 main parts to it: family of origin process, where people are exploring their own family of origin background, theory days and supervision days. And Jorma, in responding to that, and my question about how do you teach not knowing was, well, the way to teach being dialogical is to start being dialogical together. And it was sort of reiterating what I said about it being an embodied process. Some people who participated on both trainings were talking about the differences, feeling that some feeling there was too much theory on the 3-year training, but someone else had a different view on that. One of the differences between the trainings is on the foundation training, we start with practice and the theory comes afterwards. Whereas it can be a bit different on the 3-year training where participants have training reading in advance of the block. On the foundation training, it comes afterwards. Petra Hone, who shared what was important for her about the foundation trainings that we've run together a lot, she focused in particular on the opportunity to create, well, being able to create opportunities for everyone to have a voice and to try to sort of flatten the hierarchy so that people in different professional roles that would traditionally be lower in the hierarchy are sort of have the opportunity to speak their voice, to speak their truth, to contribute in a more equal way. And finally, well, we got into some dialogue at the end, yeah, about how the trainings change people. There was quite a lot of emphasis on, yeah, this was quite transformational for me. I was able to be more vulnerable as a practitioner afterwards in a positive way. And in a real emphasis that, you know, we have a responsibility as participants on a training to bring our questions and what's important for us. And it's a developmental process for us where there's kind of more responsibility on us in this process, particularly on the 3-year training, I think. And then at the end, there was a question about need adapted training and different trainings and how can we adapt to the needs in different places, but then also how can we coordinate trainings more internationally? So there's more of a sort of, you know, a shared understanding of maybe different levels of training, with the idea that you can get a lot from a 2-day training. Andy shared something of his experience of a 2-day training that was very positive. So that's as far as we got in our time.
Thank you, Nick. I like the way you rubbed your hands when you said some dialoguing started in the workshop. I like you rubbed your hands together with pleasure. Okay. All
Thank
right.
you, Brian.
Workshop 4, peer workers and open dialogue. Claire Bien. Hello, Claire. Hi, Claire. Yeah.
So my breakout was how peer workers came to be part of open dialogue, and Ed Altwies, a psychologist, and Leslie Nelson, a peer worker, were the presenters, and they shared a bit about themselves. And Leslie in particular spoke to how compelling open dialogue was for her personally, because her mother had a schizophrenia diagnosis and also was from Lapland. So when she learned that open dialogue was, you know, the model that she would be using when she and Ed were at the Parachute Project in New York City, which incorporated peer workers into teams on mobile crisis units, and they constituted a psychologist, a family therapist, a psychiatrist, and a peer worker. And Ed gave a bit of history of the Parachute Project, and you know, said that initially the mobile crisis teams were the least desirable among the various teams of that engaged in working with people with mental health challenges. But as time passed and as he began, really experiencing the benefits of working with someone with lived experience whose degree of recovery whose experiences allow them to really connect with people, and whose degree of recovery allows them to draw upon that and speak to it, connect with people who are in crisis, and also really convey what's going on to their colleagues was really helpful. Leslie said that one of the wonderful things about the trainings in open dialogue as part of the Parachute Project was that everyone trained together and that all voices were equal. And she particularly called out Peter Stastny and let's see, and I've forgotten, I can't find it in my notes, and I've forgotten the names of the other two people that she named, but it was tremendously important and really helped level the playing field, allowing the peer workers to really tap into their lived expertise in a way that was very helpful. Ed sort of spoke to some of his own foibles. As a psychologist who is professionally trained, has never struggled with mental health challenges to the degree that those of us with diagnoses have. And said that it was wonderful to be able to not feel totally responsible in the teams, on the teams, and to be able to sit back and honor a peer worker or listen to a peer worker, really connecting with the individual of concern and with the family member. And he shared a vignette about his team was Brooklyn-based and was primarily staffed by people from Blacks, from African Americans, from the Black diaspora, which included the Caribbean, Jamaica, Trinidad, who were born to American parents, who immigrated to the US or were born here, born to immigrant parents, and working with a young man from a family from South Asia. And they were working with a translator. And at one point, the person of concern shared that he heard voices. And the mother immediately launched into a diatribe and said, no, he does not hear voices, everything's fine. And the peer worker, Kiana, shared a story about how her voices with the group, how her voices had told her to put her cell phone on a pillar and leave it as a gift so that she could help fulfill her dream of helping to save the world. And immediately the young man said, oh my gosh, you hear voices? And he found it so freeing because here was someone who shared his experiences and yet had learned to manage them so much better than he did at the time. And the parents similarly were, greatly taken with the fact that here is a woman who shared experiences with their son and still was able to hold a job and do wonderful work and connect with others. And let's see, and then we opened up, members of the breakout were able to share their experiences, and some spoke to how wonderful it is to be able to connect with other people who share similar experiences, and others, to the fact that doing this work offers hope not only to people who are struggling, but also family members. And we did speak about, I'm getting lost in my reporting back, but we did certainly—
Got another minute or so, Claire.
Okay. We did speak to the importance, the fact that peer supports, and Leslie had spoken about intentional peer support, and the 3 principles and the 4 tasks of intentional peer support are from helping to learning together, individual to relationship, and fear and hope to possibility. And the 4 tasks are connection, worldview, mutuality, and moving towards. And that really is the purpose of open dialogue. Leslie invited everyone in the breakout room to really connect with her and with Ed, and to begin, sort of imagining how we can broaden the presence of peer workers on open dialogue teams, because the utility of lived expertise is enormous. And oftentimes those of us with lived experience who go on to earn advanced degrees, and there are many, 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 and historically have been many, 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 what we learn as academics oftentimes shifts the balance and doesn't allow us to tap as easily into what may be more helpful in an open dialogue, on an open dialogue team. And that's my perspective.
Thank you very much, Claire. Sounds like a very moving and important workshop you were part of. Thank you very much. And Kermit, you've got the last feedback role. You were in the workshop comparing open dialogue to other approaches. So good to hear your feedback, Kermit.
Yes, Frank Burbach presented first, talking about the differences and similarities between CBT, systemic family therapy, and open dialogue. And he was saying that contemporary systemic family therapy and CBT as well have both evolved into a more collaborative relational form, and than either one of them started out as. And he said that evolution came a lot as a result of working with psychosis, and that the basic approach to psychosis today is more not focusing on symptoms or on delusional beliefs, but on reducing stress and improving quality of life and developing deeper understanding. And he's saying that's a general evolution, and that and collaboration and shared goals and evaluating and exploring beliefs rather than challenging them. And then Claudio Fuenzalida and Javier Sempere presented on multi-family therapy, in which the goal is for basically more dialogue, and that having a lot of families talking to each other, a lot of families that are in crisis, means there's more dialogue, more varieties of relationship, more narratives, more possibilities, more ways of thinking about reality, and that's what it's all about, seeing the world through each other's eyes, and that this multifamily approach is a very open, free, and democratic form of therapy in which the families really take on the work with each other, and the therapist can really step back. And Javier, who's the psychiatrist, says that he doesn't get bored he doesn't get bored anymore, and that he learns every day about therapy and about himself. And then Mario Yuxter, I hope I pronounced that anywhere close to right, he gave us the greatest gift. I think we really won on the workshop lottery, because we got to listen to Mario play piano. And he said that Mario is a music therapist, and he said that as humans, we are intrinsically musical, and that the principles of dialogism and polyphony are also inherent to music. And so people, and that working with people in therapy to be musical with each other, to do rhythms and sometimes explore whatever instruments together, that they actually, what they experience is the experience of interactive, polyphonic, dialogical interactions, without the burden of having content that they have to navigate as well. And I was struck by that, because in the family work that we do, we're very often saying it's not really about solving the problem itself, it's about experiencing the feeling of really hearing each other and really being heard. And once you feel that, you will naturally want to do it. And then once people really get that, we find we can step back, and then they'll do that. In the dialogue, in the Q&A, John asked the question about managing risk in multifamily groups, and Javier said that he thought before doing it that there would be anarchy, but he found the opposite. That when they do therapy, the families together do therapy even better than the therapists can do. He said, and it's about creating a culture, and that when they create that culture, that the madness dissolves itself. And that struck me because I've heard open dialogue referred to as a social justice movement, and I thought that what Javier and Claudio are doing are a terrific fulfillment of open dialogue in that way. You're raising the level of awareness to an even more higher social level. And then the last comment was by Pia, who mentioned a story in which somebody was asking Jaco about the chaos of open dialogue, and Jaco's response was, "What's wrong with chaos?" And that seems like a pretty good place to end.
Thank you, Kermit, very much, and thank you for all 5 of you for your excellent feedbacks. And Nick, I'm not quite sure how we move now to the panelists who are going to respond to what they've heard. Back
Indeed,
to
we have 5 of the 6 panelists from earlier are still with us, I hope. So please could you turn your videos now? And again, you've got 15 minutes to share whatever you'd like to share, both about the feedback from the workshop, but also your experience of being in one of the workshops as well. And Kermit, you can turn off your video, and Brian and myself will do the same.
Should we just wait till everybody's there and then, right, okay, all right.
I can't turn my video on because it's been stopped by the host.
Okay, who's that? Who's saying that?
Karen?
Karen, sorry, Karen, I will, oh, there you go.
Thank you.
Okay. So you've got time now to share. Just the panelists. We're just asking the panelists to turn on their videos, not anyone else. There will be time after the panel for anyone to ask questions or to comment. So please.
I really enjoyed it. I was part of the peer support workshop, and it was fun to connect with people from the East Coast. I spent a while there myself, and I also felt really motivated to do work in peer support myself. And I just felt a real sense of connection with everyone there. Most of us have heard voices, and we were telling stories about the crazy things the voices had made us do. And it was very heartwarming.
For me, I think the discussion from the different workshops, or the feedback from the different workshops, brings up just how embedded existing paradigms are in services. The whole focus on individuals has been there through decades, and I suppose the predominance of biological treatments. So I think that just comes out, and again, it echoed so many, issues that I had through my career in trying to implement family work. And I was thinking of the inpatient services, where the resistance is there. And I think the reality is, if you're saying to people in services like that, well, people may need shorter admissions or may not need admissions at all, that the instinctive feeling for some people is, well, we're going to be out of a job then. I mean, I came across that a lot. If people aren't going to be in hospital, we won't have any work. Or if this family approach reduces relapse or the experiences of psychosis, well, then what will we have to do? So I think we have to be aware of these. And I think my feeling was that I'd like to urge open dialogue folks, not to think that it's just about open dialogue, because the and to look at the implementation research, because the challenges that you're describing are the same as what others have faced, what I faced in the program I established, and what other people who are trying to bring about that change face. And, you know, I can remember presenting research. Brian, you were talking about research and the nasty reaction to research, but I can remember presenting the evidence for psychoeducational approaches and people saying, well, I know the research is there, but you just don't believe it. And people walking out of a room, you know, psychiatrists leaving a room and not staying. So I think, you know, to get the families going, moving on to the kind of peer support workshop, to one of the strongest things I found that would shift attitude was getting the families who had benefited from the approach to speak, because they're really hard to argue with. If people say, this is my experience, it really helped me, it really changed me. It's hard for managers or clinicians to argue with that. And I think when you're feeling under attack, it's easy to retreat and just talk to other people who are similar to yourselves. But actually, you know, just to think other people have gone through that. And I suppose another thing that struck me is that all of the family approaches are becoming more collaborative and more similar as time has gone on. So there's more similarity to, you know, with all of the approaches as Frank would have presented. So I think we're distilling the essence of what works. And maybe it's similar to what I said the first time around, that we all need to kind of work more together. So those were my main reflections, really, having listened to the feedback from the different workshops.
Yeah, I was going to say very similar, but I won't have to now. But you know, this challenge to the existing status quo does seem to be the problem in this work. It really does challenge the power structures. Very inspired though by listening to all of the workshop feedback, and just something for us in the UK, when you say that people are worried about being put out of work, but that there aren't enough workers currently. The system is overrun, and if we can show that through working with families and involving peers, peer service users as well as peer carers, it takes the load off a system that is crumbling. And what I would also say is that there's something at the moment going on in the National Health Service in Britain, which is or England, the Community Mental Health Framework, where they're really trying to be more transformative for the first time in 30 years. It's a really ideal time to start talking about this and similar approaches, which I certainly am doing. And I think there is an ear for it right now because of the recognition that things haven't worked and there needs to be change. So I hope that we can pull together and really do something different, including open dialogue.
Mm-hmm. I think the point I was making, Karen, is that these feelings are not logical. You know, it's not logical that somebody's going to be out of a job, but it's just this reaction that people have when they see something different happening. The first reaction is fear and threat, and that we have to be aware of that and think, how do we work with that?
Yeah, I sort of felt there was a bit of a thread of that sort of running through things in a way as well, in the sense of there being a resistance to change, particularly if the change was seen as successful, and it producing you know, strange reactions in people, you know, denial or what have you, you know. So there's this sort of strange reaction, particularly from people that feel threatened in the so-called hierarchy in a way. And I was thinking of trying to sort of like using the dialogical approach, you know, that how do we get this dialogue going with the people who feel so threatened by something. And I was listening to the last sort of presentation there a little bit about the psychiatrist who was really enjoying himself because he was learning something every day, you know, he was learning something new. And to try and create that atmosphere where somebody is curious and is willing to become uncertain about something. It's very easy as professionals to say that you know,
you're trained to do something and you feel you have to do something. But to not do it and to stand back requires moving into an area which is very uncomfortable, but which allows growth, not just for the clients, but also for the practitioner and also for the team. And one of the things that came up was about whether or not the teams would get burnout a little bit. And my experience when I worked with the sort of outreach teams was that they couldn't get more of it. They actually really wanted to work, in that sort of way. It's a similar sort of philosophy, but they were curious. People were curious and wanting to learn, and it's trying to generate that atmosphere, I think, that curiosity, and to try and use the dialogical sort of way of trying to do that. Because my experience, I have a bad experience in that I was part of a sort of outreach movement that was around, a few years ago, and it was very successful. And we did lots of statistics and proved at how successful we were in helping people to stay out of hospital. But we were shut down as a team, and the whole sort of outreach movement was shut down for various reasons, for political reasons. So I'm concerned, of open dialogue, getting to that point where we have to understand that it's located within a system, within a political system, and within a sociological system, and so we have to sort of turn it back on itself, if you like. That's what I hear, the struggle. I sort of hear that struggle, people trying to talk about how can we do that. That's what I was sort of hearing. I don't know if that's helpful for people. Thanks.
Thanks, Alf, for your reflections. My reflections were a little bit in the same direction. There are two things that struck me a lot. First of all, what Nick Putman told in the first part of this webinar, and that he told us that every crisis is different and every process is unique. And when you have that in your mind, I'm sure that every professional also will experience something new, and that gives you a lot of energy to continue. And I feel it during all this webinar. All those people are so enthusiastic, and I feel that vitality. And that vitality is so opposite to the resistance that we see in the psychiatric world and also in the biological system. They feel attacked. And in our second workshop, it was about that attack, and it was a very moving discussion about the attack on the system, and that's what Jaco has to experience there. And we had some good reflections during that workshop. There was one reflection that I really appreciated. It was one of Giulia Pestalozzi who told us it has to do about the negative capability. It's so difficult to tolerate not knowing. And I'm trained as a psychoanalyst, and I am also trained in that not knowing. But when you are doing your psychoanalysis and as your task as a psychoanalyst, you are alone. Or you have a supervisor, but you are with two. But what is the strength of the open dialogue? That is that you are a team, that every one of the team has responsibility. And that makes you not alone in your work. And I think that that's the strength of open dialogue. That everyone in the team has its own responsibility, and in a horizontal way. There is not one person who is the end responsibility. That is normally a psychiatrist on a ward. But in the team, everyone has his own responsibility. And I think that's very, very important. Those were my reflections.
Thank you. If we have time for maybe one last reflection before we open up, if there is one.
what you just said, Ludi, because you were saying that I think the problem is that currently that the model is that the psychiatrist feels that they're the head of the team and that they're ultimately responsible. And what I love about open dialogue and about any approach where you're involving the system, the family, the network, is that it doesn't rest with that one individual, and that the carer and the patient, in inverted commas, is equally responsible and knows best, actually. Sorry, I just felt very strongly about that.
No, could I just quickly say, I was going to say the same thing almost as you, in the sense that the psychiatrist or the psychologist or whatever, the professional, is the person who is supposed to know. But the person who actually knows is the patient, and the patient and his family. These are the people who know what the problem is, and it's a question of trying to hear that. And it's very difficult if you already think you know because you're a professional. Do you know what I mean? So it's trying to find that ground where you have your experience as a professional, but you have to give way to the person who is the true professional of their life. And I think open dialogue tries to do that. That's what it seems to me.
Thank you very much for those reflections. If you could keep your videos on, Brian, maybe you'd like to turn yours on as well. And we have an opportunity now for, if anyone would like to ask a question, you can ask a question in the chat or make a comment. You can turn on your video. You can put your hand up and we've got 10 minutes for that before we wrap up today. So I see 2 videos turned on. Shayla, is it Shayla? Did you want to ask something or comment?
No, just a brief comment. Joining everyone from Peru. It's a very exciting opportunity to be here listening to the speakers and in the workshop as well. I think it's really important to try to extrapolate to the open dialogue approach model, so it can maybe be applied to other countries in the Southern Hemisphere. I think there is a lack of humanity in the clinical practice here, so it'll be really exciting and interesting to try to apply what is being worked in other countries and to apply it here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shayla. Sinead.
Hi, Nick. Yes, it has been an absolute pleasure to watch Open Dialogue grow over the years. I did the introduction course several years ago, having spent 15 years designing a course and then turning up and you'd already been doing it. It was amazing. So as a now trainer of primary school children, bringing in dialogical processes and seeing the transformations over the last 4 years, the evidence behind my course, behind the course that was run with my facilitating has been unequivocal. So South Cambridgeshire Primary State School has got the empirical evidence. So it's now about telling those stories through the mouths of children, ideally, and comedy, just to take away the dogma and just get the truth through and in a perhaps a more accessible format. It seems to be the mission I've fallen into. So I'm just overwhelmed by the global response to this way of approaching, and it works. So thank you.
Thank you, Sinead. Lee.
Yes, just thank you everyone so much for sharing your wisdom and your experience. I really like that statement. I'll take that away. How can I teach not knowing? And I think that is a real challenge for our health system, for our mental health system, especially because it almost defeats a professional, how that you've got to be trained in something, and not knowing doesn't seem to make sense, does it? But I understand from a whānau perspective and a lived experience perspective that actually acknowledging the expert in the room is so important, and listening and helping someone as they process that, so empowering. My question would be, I would love to see this come to New Zealand, and how can, you know, we've really got used to perhaps Zoom technology now. Is there any plans to do like online training of the open dialogue process for, you know, to make it more accessible, more available to other countries?
Well, yes, I mean, as I said before, but most of the trainings have gone online since September, October last year, and some of them are now starting to go back to in person. But we've all found out in these 8 or 9 months that we can do training online. I think, you know, if people have the choice and the opportunity, face-to-face is better, but there are more opportunities online than we imagined. And we've had some very moving processes online. So we've also had 2 people come from New Zealand to travel to London for trainings. And I, you know, sort of wanted to be a bit environmentally conscious. I hope that doesn't have to keep happening and there is opportunities for training in New Zealand. One of the troubles with the online thing is the 12-hour time difference or 10-hour time difference if there are people in Europe leading the training, but that's another matter. But sure, there are more options opening, I think, and the pandemic, for all the kind of challenges it's presented, has also created certain opportunities. There is an opportunity in every crisis, it would seem. So, you know, that's my answer for now.
Thank you very much.
Mia, have I pronounced your name right? Did you want to ask a question or make a comment?
Mary, you're muted.
No, she doesn't want to ask a question. Okay. Anna Maria? No? Okay. Ursula, did you want to ask something or comment?
Well, no, I was wondering about the training, the classical training. What I said, if the normal education in all the training in psychiatry in all the regions in psychiatry continues to be like it was, then it'll always be hard. I mean, it's obvious that there are kind of ideological and political reasons for that, but it feels really strange that 40 years after Basaglia, we're still talking about all people unlearning what they have learned at university. I mean, I got into this job late, just a few years ago as a second choice. So I started actually learning about relationships, about what you're doing in helping professions with relationships. That was the basis, and I had a really nice university education for that. So I think it's not that I know everything. I don't have a lot of experience, but I realized that if I start from an approach where I put myself into the relationship and where I see every client as a possibility to have an encounter with someone else, that this makes a difference. You can create an authentic relationship on which you then can construct something. And this is where the strategies or techniques or everything come in, where I have to learn a lot, actually. But this is the base, in a way. And I'm still really shocked about how many people still talk about how they have to undo what they have been taught in university or in that's everything, actually.
Thank you, Ursula. Julie, did you have something you wanted to share? We've got like a minute, so you're welcome to have it.
Yeah, I'm just sort of checking in from Cape Town. So Southern Hemisphere people, New Zealand and Peru people, just to say there is online training, and I'm part of the foundational training with Nick, and it's been just a very exciting process, and so encourage you to sign up perhaps for next year. And then also just to say that workshop number 5 was just extraordinary. I just take my hats off to those presenters, but especially to the Spanish presenters, Javier and Claudio. Javier, the psychiatrist, who was able to do inter-family work on that level with taking so much risk and keeping everybody safe. I think he just needs to speak to the psychiatrists of the world and convince them that there really is a different kind of a paradigm. So yeah, just that's what I wanted to say.
Thanks very much, Julie. And thanks to everyone who's contributed. Thanks very much to the panel. We'll be seeing most of you tomorrow. Ludi, we're not seeing you, so we bid you farewell, but thank you for your contribution. And everyone else, I think, will be back tomorrow for at least part of the day. So we're going to invite you to turn off your videos now, and just Brian and myself will have some closing words for today.
Should I start, Nick?
Why not?
Yeah. Well, it's been a from my point of view, it's been a really moving and powerful day, and I've got just a couple of comments which repeat myself a bit what I said earlier, but I like what Grainne said about, you know, the power of families speaking up about their good experience of open dialogue and how effective that can be. And I think it's bloody hard work trying to change a square wheel, make a square wheel round. But I think, you know, things are changing, and it is taking a long time. But there's no question that things are changing. And I think the 2 points I'd make. One is that families and people who've experienced psychosis now have far less tokenistic view in speaking up for services than when I first qualified as a psychiatrist and so on. In many places, there is a genuine place for people with experience and families. And I think that is beginning to shape the change. Very encouraging to hear Grainne's account of the British Psychological Society's guidelines just have come out. But I think where we'll get most leverage, I think, is when doctors and psychiatrists, especially in training, as a part of their training, learn to work with families. It's so difficult if you enjoy so much working with individuals and you've trained so much and get the confidence being with individuals, it's so hard to change and engage with families, I think. So we really have to, you know, we know from in developmental point of view that you know, people are changed for life at the beginning, and we need to think about the beginning of people's careers and put a great deal of pressure on psychiatric institutions, especially perhaps psychological too, to incorporate skills at family work in the training. But change is happening. It's happening. But it's slow. It's slower than we would wish. We always want things to happen tomorrow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Brian. I just like to say a couple of things. The first is sort of in response to what we heard from the panel there, and one comment was about the importance of open dialogue, people looking beyond, you know, to learn from the experience of other groups, other approaches that have tried to develop similar approaches, and we can learn from that. I think that's really important. I think one of the reasons that we have the panel here of mostly people from beyond the open dialogue world is we need to keep being refreshed by difference and by voices from places. So I'm going to certainly keep that in mind. And then also we're hearing something about bringing dialogue into education. I think many of these ideas and values can be of benefit in many different settings, not just mental health care settings. And I was really interested to hear about the people who are worried in hospitals, worried that if we close the hospitals, they'll lose their job. One of the things that I've often said about myself is I'm a therapist who wants to work himself out of a job. And it's a bit idealistic and it won't happen in this lifetime, but because I suppose I'm interested in the possibility of more social ways of being together and addressing things as a community. So that brought that to mind. Other than that, it's just been a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to tomorrow because I don't have to give a keynote presentation or lead a workshop. So I feel like it might be just one notch lower in the adrenaline for me tomorrow, and I can enjoy it in a different way. 90% of the participants are going to be with us tomorrow. So those of you who are not, we bid you farewell, but look forward to seeing everyone else tomorrow and some new people tomorrow. So yeah, just to say thanks to you, Brian, and thanks to everyone who's contributed to what's been an enjoyable half day. We're halfway there.
Yeah, thanks to everybody. Yeah.
Okay, just to say goodbye then. Good night, wherever you are, and see you soon.
Good morning to some.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. It was very good. Very enjoyable. See you tomorrow.